we have made the land, or we have made land a very big issue. So that whenever you're speaking about land, or you are addressing an issue that touches on land, it's usually a very emotive matter. So I think the introduction or the proposal by Mheshimiwa Wanyonyi should be looked at diligently, properly, and actually implemented if it is supposed to address the questions that we normally see about land. But most importantly, Madam Speaker, you need to remember that during the 2010 Constitution campaigns, this article was seriously buttressed, and it was one of the most contentious issues at that particular time. And it made more than 4 million people to vote against the 2010 Constitution. Reason being, there was a belief that this Constitution was going to force people to own a certain piece of land. Land beyond 5 acres was declared, or was going to be declared, as an illegality. So, Madam Speaker, I think the committee concerned on this particular implementation of this part of the Constitution should look into it deeply and do proper public participation, so that when it is going to be implemented, it is not going to raise the same emotive issues that did during the 2010 countdown to 2010 Constitution. Madam Speaker, I know the spirit of the Constitution. Actually, the meaning of that article was not meant to prejudice any owner of land, but it was actually meant to give the value to land that was meant to have. Remember, in our country, Madam Speaker, land has several functions in this country, but the most important ones are farming. Most of the people in this country are farmers, including even us. Farming is just part of our lives. Even if you are a teacher, even if you are a lawyer, even if you are an industrialist, you still farm. So, Madam Speaker, one of the major functions of land is farming. But you see, if we subdivide this land, Madam Speaker, into small units, tracts of land for farming. Madam Speaker, the other purpose of land, or the function of land, is speculation. Just the immediate member who were debating on this matter, Madam Speaker, claimed that our land has been, or to store that money in land, because obviously land appreciates. Land doesn't depreciate, like even the machines. So people normally put their money on land, and especially inheritance for their children, because 20 years after you've bought maybe 1 acre of land, it will cost more than 3 or 4 times during the time maybe when your children will be inheriting that land. So it is not for bad reason. But Madam Speaker, the most important thing that I think needs to be discussed in this particular proposal by Mheshimiwa is that if truly we want to make our country productive, if truly we want to make our land very productive, then we need to find a way that we allow the tracts of land which are meant for farming to remain so. And this one can happen through urban, or through rural to urban migration. Madam Speaker, the introduction of affordable housing in this country this year, Madam Speaker, will go a long way in helping actually those people living in villages to live in towns, and allow the farms in the villages to be used now for the purpose that was intended for. If our land is arable, why would you build houses in those lands? A house in a place where you cannot farm, so that you allow the arable part of your farm to be used for farming. So I think, Madam Speaker, the intention of this particular article is not to destroy any ownership of land. It is meant or intended to allow the parts that are arable in this country to be very productive, so that we shall not be crying each and every year of lack of maize, of lack of rice, or lack of whatever kind of foodstuff. This country is very productive, Madam Speaker. It is only that we are so lazy, we do not want to use that productive part of our land to ensure that the country is food sufficient. So I think, Madam Speaker, the intention of this particular proposal is good. It is only that we need to have a proper public participation or sensitization amongst ourselves so that we can understand the main intention. Another issue, Madam Speaker, which is very contentious, is the imagination that the land that is idle is going to be taken away by the government. Madam Speaker, whoever owns land in this country, the Constitution is clear on ownership of land, regardless of whichever mode or method you got that parcel of land. As long as you are properly registered, is your land. If the government wants to acquire it, if the governments want to have it for any use, you cannot acquire it by force. You just buy it or you compensate the owner of the land. So, Madam Speaker, the question where people are claiming that most of the tracts of land will be taken away by the government is not true, Madam Speaker. But I think there are so many idle land, and there is what we call absentee landlords, and this one must be addressed properly, because right now there are so many people who are landless. There are so many people who have nowhere to farm, Madam Speaker. There are so many areas where the government needs to farm. We just saw in the previous governments where the government, leased land in Gulalu and Gulana and put billions of money to irrigate, but they never made they never made that profit that was meant to have. They never provided food for the country. It went just like that. So, Madam Speaker, instead the government should look into those idle lands, negotiate with the owners, farm there, irrigate that land, produce food for this particular country. Madam Speaker, I think there is nowhere in this country where any idle land shall be taken away from anybody, unless it is an idle land, which I don't think there is an idle land in this country. All land in this country belongs to at least a person or the government, whether national or county government, and the forest. So, Madam Speaker, I wish to support by saying we only need to look at it diligently and find a way of ensuring that the farms or the land that we own become useful to the country. Remember, just the other day, the Deputy President told us that Russia or Ukraine is going to be giving this country certain food stuff. Madam Speaker, the reason why Ukraine or even Russia, even at this particular moment when there is real war in those countries, why they still have even sufficient food to give to other countries is because 3/4 of their land is arable and they use it for farming, not for living. People live in towns in those countries. The rest of the country is purely for farming wheat, barley, and many other stuff. That is why they can afford, even during war, to supply us with food, as we have no war, as we have never had any war within ourselves. But our people are hungry. They are sleeping hungry. Why? Because we do not utilize the land that we have. I support this, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Johanna Ngeno. The Honorable Julius Ruto, member for Kisii constituency.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. And I rise also on this point to support the motion on the land policy direction that the motion is seeking to address. First of all, as the earlier members who have contributed have alluded, land is an emotive issue. And it all goes because of the nature of our economical arrangement we have. In Kenya, we have a mixed economy, both capital and social. The capitalists have made us believe that your wealth is measured by the extent or the vast of land that you have. The capitalists have made us to believe that you have spaces, you have glory, you have a name when you acquire a large chunk of land. That is where the problem began. I want to say that this discussion has come at the right time, that Kenya is facing a lot of challenges. Food security being one of it. We have the challenge of housing, now that the government is going to affordable housing. Even as we are looking at this issue of as to what size of a land that we need to hold in terms of minimum and maximum, we also need to ask a lot of questions around it. And the biggest questions that we need to ask, even those existing lands that the troubles our families are going through because of succession challenges, inheritance issue, cultural issues. It is, in my opinion, that the government need to take the lead on this. and we need a multi-agency approach on these issues. We need the right advice to our families, those who are fighting in courts. We have lands which have not been titled because of way back cases. I have one in Keses constituency called Keses Kelji. After the Musungu went, the shareholders who came in, some of them came in deceit of others that their land is there. They have gone to court, court after court. It's now almost 60 years, and that matter has not been addressed. So my approach is, as we are looking at this, we need a serious land policy to be able to articulate the matters of land. If it is litigation issues, we also need to see how court can come in and give us alternative way of land disputes to be addressed so that we speeden the cases of land. And then we get back to our original glory, where Kenya, we were self-sustained in terms of food production. On land fragmentation, it's a reality. Right now, we see everywhere you move. I was traveling the other day to Nyanyuki. Between Nyeri and Nyanyuki, there is serious advertisement and marketing of the land ought to have been there for production, being fragmented for settlement. And then we need to ask ourselves, how much does it profit to own a land of, say, 5 acres, 2 acres, just to put your own house there? You are staying in Nairobi, only what you go there, you go only on holiday. You've now denied an opportunity for rearing of animals in that area, or for cultivation, or say for economic activity and for food security. So I rise to make my submission that we need to ask the national government, the county government, they need to come together. We need serious policies that are going to address even the issue of physical planning. Right now, this land fragmentation comes with other challenges. Essential services, auxiliary services that are required, sewer lines, access to water, access to power, is becoming a challenge. Even only roads alone now, making roads of connection, is becoming a challenge because of this fragmentation. So what I'm trying to say is this house need to give a direction, and the national government and the county government need to have a serious sitting on this matter. I know county governments have this devolved function, but they don't have sufficient capacity to address. We have the physical planning issues again that are coming into play. So we need to put all this together. Finally, is to support this motion by Ferdinand Wairidu that we need to come up with a legislation support that we have to address at which point that we need to allow fragmentation of the land for settlement, at which area we need to reserve it, the little that space that we still have, because we have to eat to live. These small Kenyans that are, the small generation that is coming up now need food to exist for years to come. If we don't project this one, now the government is struggling in feeding the current generation, and we are not foreseeing the future challenges that is going to come in. Kenya will not be sustained by imports. Kenya has to have a discussion on a way of supporting its population by producing food locally. And one of the issues to address is the land mass that we have in place. Finally, the other day, the president talked about taxing of wealth. We are now facing with a lot of challenges of raising our revenues. And one area now on wealth matters is on the issue of land. We also need to have a discussion, a policy on now this idle land. The landowner who sits in Nairobi and 500,000 acres back there in the village, we need to awaken this person by telling him, look at this. If this land cannot be utilized for production, the government generates revenue, then let this land attract some annual taxes on this so that you choose either to lease it out to a potential investor, either to deal it yourself or pay the government. And the government raises revenues to be able to meet its obligation. So this discussion needs to be looked at it seriously. We need to be able to protect, let us zone areas so that we don't open up available spaces now for settlement, for fragmentation of the land. Let us zone it to some area. Even it makes easier for the government to provide the service, the said services, water and the sewerage, and even health services. Because sometimes you go to a place, you get some settlement in a radius of around 5 kilometers. When you want to put an hospital, it becomes a challenge for this population to access health services. So let us concentrate settlement in one area, let us leave the other area for production. So, Madam Speaker, I rise to support this motion, but I want to say we need to have enormous public participation. What kills such good approach is when the agencies doesn't give an opportunity to members of public to be able to vent their opinion. Let us allow members of public to make their contribution. Let us bring it down. Let us discuss it. in the long run, when they understand, they would support the government. But if we approach it from top down, I want to tell you, it will be a problem. Nobody is willing to let go of the land. We also need to sensitize public on the issues of succession, because that's where the problem is. We don't want to have these families day in, day out. We get the femicides taking place, children killing their parents, parents killing their children because of the issue of land. And in the long run, you look at it, it's a problem. The issue of support to families, that is also one of the triggering factor. We are poor, and the only hazard we have is land. You want to take your children to school. You want to pay for health service, health care, cancer that is ravaging the country seriously in our area. The only available money is the land. So you sell not because you wanted to sell, but you sell to address the challenge that is facing you. So as we are looking at this, also the government should also think outside the box and say, what are we going to do to protect this? Let us provide alternative way of supporting the needs of the households. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I want to congratulate my neighbor, Ferdinand Mheshimiwa. You came up with the right motion. We need to put it. And Honorable Mbati said, we need to look at it to execution. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member for Kisses. Honorable members in the public gallery, we have Mbine High School from Kilome constituency, Kilome County. On my own behalf and that of the National Assembly, I would like to welcome them to the National Assembly. Honorable members, the next will be the Honorable Clive Gisairo, member for Kitutu Masaba.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And would like to thank Honorable Ferdinand Wanyonyi for bringing such a motion to this House. As most of the speakers have said, land is a very emotive topic. Honorable Mbadi addressed me here and said he knows how my people are having problems with land fragmentation. The main issue here, when it comes to land, I would like us to look at it from a different angle. This country needs to invest in education. The more our people will be educated, the more the need for owning small pieces of land will diminish. I have many friends from other continents, and I've never once ever had one of them telling me that he owns pieces of land. That is a behavior in Africa. Madam Speaker, I remember my father used to tell me, and my brothers, because we are 6 sons, my sons, I don't have land to give you. The only piece of land I can give you is education. And true, me and my siblings, we've never looked at what size of land our father had. This country needs to invest in education. The moment we invest in education, these young men and women will go out there to fend for themselves and not looking back to go fragment the little that there is. With continued fragmentation, Honorable Speaker, we continue to make the food shortage situation even worse. So while we all claim to own a piece of land, we all struggle to feed our families. Let this government invest a lot in education, and therefore the pressure on land will go down. It's not a must for someone to own land, and that is the message you should have to our people. By not owning land does not make you be a failure in life. There are many ways of owning assets, and land is not the only asset. Madam Speaker, for our land to be productive, it has to be of substantive sizes. I come from Gusii region. We have rain, the soils are fertile, but we no longer can feed ourselves. because when I grew up, every home could produce enough to feed itself and something extra to take to the market. That is not the case today. In Kisii right now, very few homes can produce enough to feed themselves. Let us change the mentality of our people, and that is the only way we can move this country forward. So on the motion, I don't see the issue of regulating the maximum being a problem, but the issue on the minimum will be a problem unless we have a mentality shift. Another thing, I really was very proud to be a Kenyan in the last election. That for once, we did an election, very competitive, and we came out of it without the normal post-election violence. If this trend continues, it will make Kenyans to be free to go and own land outside their ancestral homes. And this will also help in reducing the pressure on land. So we, as politicians and political leaders and the government, need to ensure that the trend that we saw in the last election continues. That is the only way the Abagusi and any other community will be free to go to Kitale, North Rift, and own land without the fear that after every 5 years, these may be taken away from me. So the political environment also determines on how land is subdivided. Because if I fear that if I own land out there, I face a risk of being ejected and what is mine being taken because I don't belong there, then there is the pressure of me going back home to insist that what my father left, I must get my share, so that in case the unfortunate happens, I have a fallback plan. So we as the leaders also, let us live as Kenyans. Let us show our people that you can live anywhere. You can own property anywhere. Because some of these people who come from areas where they do farming can bring those skills to areas where there are not those skills, and food production will improve. Lastly, Madam Speaker, the housing issue. While we are talking about housing in Nairobi and the big cities, the government needs to take these housing programs to all parts of this country. The moment we have affordable housing, people will stop insisting on getting small pieces of land to build a home for their family. With affordable housing, people will be encouraged to live together and leave most of the land for production. Madam Speaker, I sit by supporting this motion, and I hope we as the leadership will do our role back in the community to make people understand that land is not the beginning nor the end of life or success. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Mary Emase, member for Teso South constituency.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity. I would like to support this motion by Honorable Wanyonyi, seeking government intervention to enforce compliance to the existing land legislation with respect to policy and regulations. Madam Speaker, I want to start my contribution by giving an illustration. And I invite members to visualize a scenario where we have a farmer who has 2 acres of land, and he has 4 sons. And each one of those sons inherits half an acre. Another quarter or half of that half is consumed by the homestead. So how much is left for cultivation or any other activity? it is a quarter, a piece of land. So what does this portray? That the amount of land left for any other activity, including farming, is diminishing every day. And therefore, the issue of land fragmentation is real. It is a concern, and I think this motion raises an awareness to that fact. Madam Speaker, while on the other hand, we have individuals who own huge pieces of land, and these huge pieces of land are actually lying idle, contrary to the provisions of Article 61 that advocates for productive and sustainable use of land. So, Madam Speaker, I support this motion, and I think we should actually push for a review to the existing legislation, whereby certain provisions are introduced that provide for those who have huge pieces of land and they are idle and they are not being used, to lease it to those who have capacity and can put that land into some productive use at reasonable rates, so that if you have a piece of land, even if it is urban for commercial, you are not yet ready to develop, you can lease it to somebody else, it generates income for you, that other person with the capacity puts it into some kind of a productive use. Madam Speaker, the truth is, it's not that we lack legislation on land policy and regulation. We have sufficient legislation. But I think the problem is enforcement. There is no serious implementation with respect to this legislation. And Madam Speaker, as a result of this excessive fragmentation, it has contributed largely to low food production. That is the reason why we are now going for importation of GMOs into this country, because the country is experiencing low production, the prices have been pushed up, and it's not just because of inflation that has pushed up the prices of farm inputs. It is not only, it's also because of lack of, we are not leveraging on technology, for example, because the pieces are too small. So therefore, we are not able to use mechanization. So the use of mechanization remains actually a mirage to majority of our farmers. Madam Speaker, we cannot also reap from economies of scale, because when we are farming, we are reduced to subsistence farming on small pieces of land. We also cannot reap from the benefits of economies of scale, and therefore we continue to suffer as a country, not only because of prolonged drought that has, as a result of climate change, but because of so many of these factors as put together. Madam Speaker, I think going forward, the Committee on Lands, in consultation with the CS Lands, have to relook and review these regulations, and the Committee on Implementation, the committee of this House, has to do its job to ensure that there is compliance and there is enforcement of legislation with respect to land. Madam Speaker, I beg to support. Thank you.
Chair, Honorable Mase, the Honorable Engineer Thaddeus Zambia, member for Kilome constituency.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity. And before I contribute on this motion, let me appreciate my students from my constituency, that is Bean High School, which is the next school from my homestead, so they should feel welcomed. Madam Speaker, I will be very brief, contribute on this motion, and let me first appreciate Honorable Wanyonyi for coming up with this very important motion, especially now when we are talking about the food insecurity in this country, which is as a result of our land and availability. The issue of land is a very sensitive and emotive matter, especially in our country. First of all, Madam Speaker, there is a need, up to now from 1963, we should not be talking about areas and the land which has no title deeds. We have over 60 years since we got independent almost, and the first thing, the primary thing is that we should have title deeds. Whether you have a quarter an acre, you have thousands of acres,
That is the first initiative the government should employ, to have title deeds for the ownership of land in this country. Madam Speaker, I have a concern. Right now, we are talking about food insecurity in this country, when I know we have a lot of large tracts of land owned by individuals. I think we should have a regulation where even the government can approach the owners of large tracts of land, invest in that land in terms of irrigation, produce enough food for this country, and right now it's not to be talking about the GMO importation of food, which has been the center of discussion in this floor of the House. Madam Speaker, the issue of land, and I'll give an example. From here, we have the Konza Techno City. When the government is talking about investing in affordable housing, in Konza Techno City, that is a city which is within my constituency. We have 5,000 acres of land which has been bought by the government. And as we speak now, we have the data center, the Kenyan data center is within that Konza Techno City. A lot of infrastructural development has been done. So what I'm saying is that let the government open up its eyes, because from here to Konza Techno City is almost like 30 minutes drive. Let the government open the eyes and stop engaging in expensive land within the city and just come to my constituency where we have the Konza Techno City. We can provide over 1,000 acres. We invest in housing, affordable housing. Madam Speaker, this is part of the issues the motion is all about, to have some regulations. And in this juncture, because now I've been able to be in the Lands Committee, Madam Speaker, where you served for 5 years, I think some of these issues of land will be a priority, especially on my side, so that we can manage to have proper regulations of the land. Madam Speaker, so that I can allow other members to contribute on this motion, just to, my closing remarks is that basically the issues of land worldwide are so, they have not been, it has not been well regulated, and I urge the Kenyan government, first of all, to make sure that in the next like 2-3 years, we have title deeds for every land, whether it is government land, whether it is individual land, so that when we talk of investment in these lands, we have no dispute. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity. I allow other members to have the time to contribute. No.
I would like this opportunity to go to the Honorable Rebecca Tonkey, member for Narok.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I raise up on this motion to oppose it. Madam Speaker, I can see the Honorable Wanyonyi, who is my friend, looking at me badly. But Madam Speaker, I come from a community where we own chunks of land, and this land is not idle, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if I sit in this House and allow this law to pass, Madam Speaker, I'll not be doing the right thing as a representative of the people of Narok County, and generally the pastoralists who have many acres of land. Madam Speaker, the issue of fragmentation is okay. I agree with that part, but when it comes to land use and limitation of land, Madam Speaker, this is not fair to the people who have land. There is no idle land in Kenya, Madam Speaker. Every owner of a land has a land, and rightfully that land belongs to people of that particular place. Madam Speaker, we have group ranches in Narok, we have group ranches in Samburu, and we have group ranches even in Kajiado. And this land is community land, and it's not idle. When you look at many acres, Madam Speaker, that, for example, I have, those acres belong to my animals, and my animals will graze there. Some land I live there. Some land are used for other purposes like farming. And therefore, Madam Speaker, when we come to such a piece of legislation which will oppress other people, then I think, Madam Speaker, it will not be fair to the pastoralist communities. Madam Speaker, if we want to deal with the issues of fragmentation, I agree with the honorable member who said that, Madam Speaker, let us educate our people. And in that case, for those people who are unfortunate, who come from places where there are no plenty land or acres, then can we build maybe story buildings so that we can have our people live there, but don't go to the extent of limiting people on the land, on the acreage they own. Madam Speaker, I oppose this motion and I do not support it. Thank you.
Very well, member for Narok. This is a house of debate, and you have the freedom to debate the way that you want to. So next time when anyone looks at you badly, as you had indicated, do not worry about non-verbal communication. Here we only consider what is verbal. Very well. The next person, the next honorable member that gets the opportunity is the Honorable Mboni Mwalika, member for Kitui Rural.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And first, I want to thank Honorable Wanyonyi for bringing this motion to this House for discussion. And I would like to say that, as other members, land is a motive issue, and it's not really a motive for any bad reason, but it's because land is owned, part of land is owned by very few people in this country, leaving majority of people landless, leaving a majority of people with very small land, which are not very productive. Madam Speaker, people own land for different reasons. They own land for farming. Others own land as a store of value and the prestige. You know, you see somebody saying that I have 1,000 acres of land, I have 5,000 acres of land, and they are not using it. So it's a prestige issue. And I remember when our CS were being vetted, some of them were saying they are valued at 700 million, 1 billion shillings. Most of this value, the net value they are talking about, is land. And others, they own it because of speculation. You buy land so that when it appreciates, you can be able to sell it and make some money. But, you know, land, idle land, is not useful to this country. Because land is one of the 4 factors of production. There's land, there's labor, there's capital, and entrepreneurship. And if you put these together, you produce and you make the country grow. This country, we have a lot of land, idle land, and also a big number of people who are idle. Now, if you put idle land plus the labor, which is idle, we will be able to produce enough food for this country. We will not be able to go importing food. We will not be able to go importing GMO foods. And I remember, I was reading today, the CS trade said that we are bringing GMO food. But I was reading newspaper today, and already ships have started docking in Mombasa, right? So I don't know how we are going to manage some of these things. But I also thank the members of parliament, leaders from Rift Valley, for opposing importation of food, because they have enough food. This country has enough food. The issue is how do you distribute this food from the more productive areas to less productive areas in Ukambani. I think that's the issue we should be able to address. Madam Speaker, as we speak, we bought 90% of wheat production, wheat consumption in this country. And I went somewhere in Machakos. There's a farmer from Australia who is farming wheat and is doing very well. So it's not only that food can be produced in Rift Valley and other areas, but even in Ukambani, we can produce enough food. What we need is water. What we need is to do irrigation, and we'll be able to produce food. Those with large tracts of land, which they are not using, or they are not using it optimally, should be compelled to lease the land to Kenyans. Actually, me, I'm not for the idea of imposing rates, land rates to them, but they should be compelled to lease land to the people who want to use it for production. Because even if you impose rates, we get that money, but how is that money going to help this country? But if you lease the land to people who can able to farm it, we are going to have food, we are going to have people engaged, people are going to earn income, the economy will grow. I remember, I don't know, Honorable Wanyonyi, how you wanted the maximum land ownership or minimum, but I remember Rwanda, they came up with the idea of having 25 acres of land, maximum for each person. Maybe Honorable Wanyonyi should check that, if it works or not, because you know the problem is not the small people. The problem is the big people, like you and me, who owns a lot of land in that country. Unfortunately, me, I don't believe in land I don't use. In developed countries, the land use policy is very clear, that you know, they have zoned their areas. There are areas where they use for settlements. You go somewhere, you find this is for settlement. The rest of the land is farming. You go to South Africa, look, when you're in the air, look at South Africa, the large farms, they are producing a lot of food. A lot of food. Actually, South Africa can feed Sub-Saharan Africa because they are not dividing their land for settlement. They have zoned their areas for settlement, their areas for farming, and they have mechanized their land, their farming, so that at least when you mechanize, you get big returns for the farm and for the investment. With those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I think we need to, not that we lack policies, we lack legislation, but the implementation and the enforcement in this country is the problem. So with those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable members, the next opportunity goes to the Honorable Florence Jamatia, member for Baringo County. The Honorable Jamatia seems to have withdrawn from the chamber. So, honorable members, the next opportunity goes to the Honorable Agnes Pereio, member for Narok North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to add my voice to this issue of land. And I want first to start by saying that we need to look at land because land is a sensitive issue. And especially for us who come from communities that own huge chunks of land, and we cannot stand here to say that that land is idle, because our land is not idle. I myself is here because I own a huge pieces of land, and I came here because I was able to sell the animals that I take care of, and they use the land to graze on, and I sold those animals and made money that made me come to this house. And as I stand here, I cannot support Honorable Wanyonyi's decision to bring this issue before this House so as to come up with a decision that there is land that is idle. We have no idle land where I come from, and I cannot support that discussion. Land is used in my community as an asset, and land is an asset for those that own land. And there are ways of acquiring land. You can acquire land by buying. You can acquire land by inheriting land from your parents. You can acquire land as your right. And I think it is our right to own land wherever we come from. So we cannot treat this issue generally, because we have farmers, we have pastoralists who have land to graze their animals. And therefore, we cannot say that our land is idle. I cannot support that, and I cannot stand to support. I'll keep talking about it as land that is being used to graze our animals. So our land is in use. And when you look at other communities, they are now coming, invading our counties, because they are also coming to own land where they can own land and where they can buy land. And I'm not opposed to anybody buying land, but for those that have land, we cannot say that the government need to make these people pay some revenue because the land is idle. It's not idle. It is land that we are using for grazing. It is land that we are using to take care of our animals. We are not importing maize because of the land that is idle. We are importing maize because somebody somewhere want to make money out of the hunger that is there, and we are not lacking rain because of the idle land. We lack rain because we are not planting trees. So we need to tell our people to plant trees so that we can have forests that can give us rain. For that reason, I stand to oppose Mr. Wanyonyi's discussions or ideas of saying that land, we need to look at land, and land need to be reviewed because there is land that is idle. And we all have a right to own land. We have a right to have title deeds. And once you have a title deed, then that land remains yours, and it is not land. It is not idle. So I want to say that there is no idle land, and I come from Narok, where people own huge chunks of land. There are those that do farming and those that graze their animals in their own land. So I stand to oppose, and I cannot support that because it will be going against the people that elected me to this house. And I came to this house to make sure that I protect their interests. And that's why I stand here to oppose that issue. And there is no, and I repeat again that we have no idle land in my county, where I come from. Thank you.
The Honorable Parashina Sakimba, member for Kajiado South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute on this motion about the issue of minimum and maximum land holdings by Honorable Ferdinand Wanyonyi. Madam Speaker, my comments or my view is that let us focus on protecting the pastoralist land, rangeland, and community land. The view that the pastoral